Welcome, everybody. Really excited whether you're listening to the recording or whether you're joining us live right now. Really happy to have you with us. Again, this is part of Fit Pro Summer School. 3 burning questions in 30 hot minutes. Maybe I said that backwards, but either way, same thing. And I'm just delighted that today we have with us Annika Mitchell. I've got her bio here right now. The topic for today is what happens to my business when we die, right? And it's a very somber topic in a lot of ways. And some of the impetus for this was, I won't get into it too much, but I actually, in 25 years of business ownership, both as a trainer and as a business coach for people, have had two relatively young and very dear clients unexpectedly die. And we all have those stories in our lives. We do know that it happens. So it's important to take a minute and know what needs to be done and how to not only protect our assets from our business, but help the people that are left to take care of things when they pass, because that is uh, a really difficult burden on them that I'm sure, Annika, you could speak to over and over again. They're not only grieving the loss of you, but then they're trying to navigate a bunch of things that they're not trained to navigate. So we are in very, very good hands. Um, Again, this is Annika Mitchell, and she focuses her practice in the areas of estate planning and probate, as well as business and corporate law. So that's awesome for us because she knows what we need to do when we pass, but she also knows what we need to do as small business owners when we pass. So she works closely with individuals, couples, and families to make sure their hard earned assets, those are hard earned, guys, we know, are transferred to intended beneficiaries. Annika also collaborates with the client's professional advisors, such as financial planners, insurance professionals, accountants, bankers, and other attorneys. If you've attended any of our other talks, she works exactly with those people that we've had speaking to you already. Annika also represents a number of business clients in transactional matters such as entity selection and business formation, corporate minutes, governance, business contracts, letters of intent, mergers and acquisitions, as well as asset and stock purchase agreements or transactions. So I feel like this is a scenario of we have someone who's overqualified for this conversation. Um, so, Annika, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. This is so nice of you to host. And I've been listening to the other sessions, very informative. And this is just a great way to get that information across. So thank you for hosting and for inviting me.
You're welcome. I'm very glad you're here. And yeah, I truly have a lot of really awesome, smart people around me, including yourself. So I've said this before, set myself up with the challenge of, 30 minutes. Get to it, Michelle, right? So we're going to kick things off with our first question, right? This is all under the topic of what happens to my business when, I die, when I pass. Question number one, what happens to our business and assets if we do nothing before our death? And I caveat this with if we're incorporated or if we're not incorporated.
Yes, this has a couple different layers to it. Business law is certainly one area, but then we're also going to need to take a look at the Probate Act and what would happen. So if a person has a sole proprietorship, all of their assets are in their name individually. There is no separate entity. They may have a checking account that pays their mortgage, that pays the orthodontist for their kids' braces, that pays for the car insurance. And then they might have a bank account that is collecting client proceeds, that is paying studio fees, that is paying a business attorney, just for some regular advice. That account might be dedicated to the business, but it's still in the person's name individually.
Mm.
If a person does not do anything, then all of their assets are going to be subject to the Probate Act. That doesn't necessarily mean, probate is necessary, but it's going to be subject to the Probate Act. Now, if a person has incorporated or they have formed an LLC, if they have some type of business entity that is regulated by the Secretary of State, the first thing that I would do is take a look at those corporate documents. What do the corporate documents say? If you're an LLC, hopefully there is an operating agreement that will identify what happens in case the LLC owner passes away. Um, or if you have a corporation and you have filed your articles of incorporation, hopefully you have bylaws that address the exact same thing. Now, adding to that, if you are a multi-member LLC, or if you're one of many shareholders or two shareholders even, um, I really hope that there is some sort of documentation, because then it's not just you. You're also looking at what happens if you pass away. Well, what happens to the surviving business owners? What happens to the company itself?
Oh,
So the first place we would look, in terms of what would happen to that entity, is the corporate documents. If they're silent, then those assets are probably going to be subject to the Probate Act. Um,
can can I ask for just a
sure.
little vocabulary, legal jargon clarification? Could you share for everyone, just in case there are a few of us that don't know, what you mean by the Probate Act?
Sure. In Illinois, we have uh, various acts and statutes that talk about, they're the laws basically. The Probate Act is going to govern what happens within the probate sphere. So probate covers not just people passing away. It also covers scenarios where a person might be incapacitated and they need to have court interference or court interjection in order to help manage or settle their affairs. Probate could also potentially talk about guardianship of minors. So probate covers a lot of things, but for purposes of today, it's really talking about what happens if a person passes away or if a person becomes incapacitated.
Okay, and probate is, sorry, the word probate, that term, right, that we keep using, it means, it is what? It is a segment of the courts. It is a way of doing things. What is probate?
Probate. If you have ever taken a trip to Florida and you have sat around a condominium pool, I guarantee you have heard someone at the pool talk about their estate going through probate.
Okay.
Most of the time, it's elderly people that are talking about probate or thinking about probate. But a lot of us don't know when we may be subject to probate. It could come at any time. And Michelle, those clients that you had, they did not know that they were going to pass away. They were not elderly. So probate is really, it's just court oversight to a person's estate. If a person passes away, we need to have the authority to bring it before the court. So typically that is an heir of the person that passed away comes to court and petitions the court to open a probate. And opening a probate can consist of bringing the deceased person's will, if they have one. If they don't have one, then the state of Illinois gives all of its residents a free will that dictates how a deceased person's estate is going to pass. And we can definitely talk about that as well. But the probate process is bringing a deceased's assets, liabilities, heirs, or beneficiaries to a judge, having that judge help work through the issues. Ultimately, if there is an estate that can be divided after expenses, liabilities are paid, then it's distributed to heirs and beneficiaries. And heirs and beneficiaries are required to sign off on that, and then we can close the estate. In Cook County, it can be anywhere from a 1 to 2 year process, and that's with smooth sailing. Some of the other counties, it can be a little quicker.
Yeah. And then I see someone has a hand raised. Is there a quick question?
Yes, I have one. It's
Sure.
Marcus here. So pertaining to the probate process, then it's something that has to be opened up by you or someone that has entitlement to any of the deceased property, or does it have to be opened up if nothing has to go through probate, like everything is assigned to beneficiaries through the will and also on the actual accounts? Do you need to have open up probate in that case, or you don't have to?
Good question, Marcus. No, probate is not necessary for every single estate. Um, the way I kind of describe probate is it's for homeless assets. If you have an asset with a beneficiary designation form, like life insurance, for example, and you've identified either people or charitable organizations as a beneficiary on that beneficiary designation form, then we know how that asset is supposed to pass. It's going to pass to the beneficiaries. Or if you have an asset where you own it with another person, a good example might be real estate or a joint brokerage account. If a person passes away, that asset is going to go just by operation of title. The asset is going to pass to the surviving owner. So no probate would be needed in either of those scenarios. Probate would cover things that are only owned in the deceased person's name, that doesn't have a beneficiary designation form.
Okay.
Sometimes checking and savings accounts won't have a beneficiary designation.
Hmm.
It varies from bank to bank, and also a product to product. Depending on what the bank offers for checking, maybe they have 3 different types of checking accounts. Maybe one has a beneficiary designation form. So it's really important to know exactly what you own, how you own it, and what happens to your assets if you were to pass away, because it's only those homeless assets that are going to be subject to probate. Now, there is a little bit of an exception there, and that is if the cumulative value of the homeless assets are under $100,000 and there's no real estate at all, then you might be able to not have to go through probate. If it's under that $100,000 threshold, you might be able to do something called a small estate affidavit. That's a probate alternative. But if the deceased person has real estate in their estate where they're the sole owner of real estate, or if they have assets, homeless assets that are larger than $100,000, then you're looking at a probate.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Now, one of the things that I have found though is that, in fact, I get calls on this almost regularly, where a person has an LLC or a corporation in place. They have a bank account at the bank that is titled in the name of the LLC or in the name of the corporation. Unfortunately, the small estate affidavit is not going to work for those assets because those assets are not in the individual's name. Those assets are going to be governed by the corporate documents, or some other type of mechanism that's going to have them stay outside of probate. But I've had a number of cases where family members of a person has passed away and they know that there's $10,000 in a corporate bank account. unfortunately, the only way to get those funds out of the bank is to open a probate. Even though it's under 100,000, the, the only way to get access to those funds is to open a probate.
Okay.
I feel like you're setting me up. Thanks so much for asking that question, Marcus. I feel like and that was something I should have actually said at the beginning, that I know not only have sadly, two clients in all my years passed unexpectedly, and I saw what happens. I feel like there's some of us that are getting to the age of, you know, transition of care for parents and elders in our families, and watching, things that can happen. I know, my dad passed years ago, and I have plenty of clients that have those situations. So it's becoming more, top of mind, as we go through, just life, not just small business ownership. But okay, Annika, question number 2. And I've learned not to put up the 2 fingers for 2, because then I get a balloon party, which is not intended for what happens to my business when we die webinar. Anyhow, okay. Now I really want to do it. Okay. What protections could we put in place, and how could they help us as, right, small business owners that want to do the best we can in planning?
The number one thing that I would look at is,
Yeah.
if you are looking to incorporate, whether that is with an LLC or a corporation, if you're looking to set up that business entity, make sure that you have the corporate documents that go along with it. You can absolutely go to the
Oh,
Secretary of State's website and you can form an LLC. But what a lot of people don't do is they don't have an operating agreement. And an operating agreement should address what happens if the business owner becomes incapacitated. Who is able to manage the business if the business owner becomes incapacitated? Who has the legal authority to be able to accept checks or write checks? Same thing with a corporation. You might have filed your articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State, but do you have bylaws that talk about some of the dynamics of how that business is going to function? Talk to Melody and Trisha about getting those things set up, because they're important. And if you have partners, if there's 2 or more of you in an LLC, or if there's 2 or more of you in a corporation and your shareholders, be sure. I mean, this is critical. You have to have something documented there. You do
say the
not,
first part again. You have to have something documented
if
for
you
what?
have partners, you
Gotcha.
definitely
Yeah.
want to have an operating agreement or a shareholder agreement. You want to have that documented. And you might not be thinking, well, I'm single, I don't have kids. If I pass away, I'm not really worried about what happens. Well, you probably have heirs, though. Your heirs would be your parents, your siblings, or maybe just your siblings, or maybe nieces and nephews. If
Hmm.
they know that you're a shareholder, they might be interested in it, number one. But the flip side of it, you might be in a partnership with someone that you're not particularly fond of their family members, or maybe you really want to protect yourself from your partner's heirs or potential liabilities. Get those corporate documents in place to get some of these issues hammered out. Also, and this is often overlooked, what happens if you or one of your partners becomes incapacitated?
Right.
Certainly there's a degree of empathy that people have. If someone can't work, they may not be able uh, to have income coming in, particularly if it's driven by results. But there also could be a possibility of a person not being able to work, but still having distributions from the corporation or from the LLC. And sometimes that can create a lot of friction because now you have one partner that is seemingly doing all of the work to support two partners or multiple partners. You really want to make sure it's kind of like a prenup. When everybody's happy, everybody's coming together,
Mhm.
everybody's got a common goal, that's the time to knock out some of these issues, not when a person has, suffered a stroke and isn't able to work or has come down with, some other surprise illness. You want to make sure that these things are addressed well ahead of time so that there's a process in place. And so people really understand what expectations are, but also what could be coming to them in the event they are the incapacitated one.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And just for any new or younger trainers on the call or watching the recording, when Annika says distributions, she means like, getting paid from the business or, an amount of money that you're going to be getting that is not necessarily traditional payroll or a paycheck. So it's just money from the business that you'd be getting. So it brings up a really great point too, because I don't know if this has hit as everyone's radar, but one of the things that, I was just heartbroken about when I was trying to help the family of a client that unexpectedly passed was, and this is advice I give to all my trainers and coaches and studio owners, we want to have recurring billing, right? We want people to understand that healthy living is a lifestyle and whatever niche we're in, that, we're committed to help you. You need to commit to yourself, right? We have this kind of ongoing relationship for whatever duration, but it's definitely beyond, 1 or 2 months when there isn't necessarily a plan or at least someone else who's in charge or has access to, passwords or accounts or things, like the recurring billing keeps going. And then you have people who they understand it's a mess, but it's still a mess, right? And who are being charged for services that clearly aren't being delivered anymore. So there's I think what you're bringing up is there's a huge ripple effect of potential struggle when we don't have a plan in place or we didn't look at things ahead of time. Am I
That's
hearing you
exactly,
correctly?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that nod to, the work that Melody and Trisha do or whomever your attorney is of it's reinforcing that like, take a look at where are your letters of incorporation, right? Like that's great. They're saved on my computer and in the cloud, but if I'm the only one that can log in, right? Do I have it printed somewhere? Am I doing, have I looked at my bylaws recently? Do I really know if I have, an what did you call it? I wrote it down, operating agreement, right? And how it lays things out. So wow, these are really, really good reminders. Okay. Question number 3. We ready?
Ready.
What is the most common mistake you see or the most common problem left for loved ones or business partners?
Michelle, I think you touched on it really right from the beginning, and that is, you know, if a person has passed away, there's going to be family members that are grieving,
Yeah.
and there's, and I see it a lot with the clients I work with on the probate side. Um, as much as they love the person, there's also the survivors have a little bit of anger. Why did you leave me? Certainly it's out of anybody's control in most cases, but there's a little bit of anger and part of the grieving process. And that anger can just get compounded if a family member has passed away and their affairs are a mess. It really puts a tremendous burden on the surviving family members. They are scrambling to try to figure out, what did they own? Were there beneficiary designation forms in place? Did they have a will? I occasionally get phone calls. My sister passed away, but I found her card and some of your belongings. Did she ever do a will? No, she didn't do a will with me.
Oh,
There's uh, the lack of organization. It can really be devastating for survivors. And that's just the emotional side of things. That's not even looking at the financial piece. Setting up a will, power of attorneys, and a trust, it's a couple $1,000s. But the alternative, if you have everything organized, the alternative is you're probably looking at about 10, 15, 20, $30,000 on a probate.
Mm,
And the majority of that expense is probably attorney's fees. There's some court costs, there's some other components that are required as part of the probate process, but for the most part, it's attorney's fees. What I would highly recommend folks do is, number one, get organized, understand what it is you own, how you own it, and what happens if you become incapacitated or if you become deceased. What happens to those assets? The second thing that I would do is be knowledgeable, understand exactly what benefits there may be with certain assets you own. If
what do you mean by that?
for example, if
Oh yeah,
you
example would be perfect.
are if you're a solo, you may or may not have an LLC or a corporation, but you're on your own. You're the sole breadwinner. You might have a long-term care policy that if you become disabled in any way, the insurance policy is going to continue giving you a paycheck. Sometimes
Mm,
that type of life insurance also has a death benefit. So if you've passed away, there might be a benefit to your heirs or your loved ones or someone that you've designated on the beneficiary form. So really know what you own, but understand how is it going to pass. The last thing that I would do is assess your risks. If you truly are, a solo, you don't have family members that are dependent on you, um, you you have to do what's comfortable for you, and maybe that means I'm going to throw everything into the business and I'll worry about getting a will or a trust set up later. But revisit that every once in a while. Once the business is, you feel comfortable, it's successful, you can kind of take a step back. I would definitely then reassess. Okay, is it now time for an estate plan? Should I do some of the other things that are going to help me get organized?
yeah, and I think something that's really on point, everything you're saying, obviously, but something else, with just the last, you know, couple minutes left here, I would say the time, the time that your loved ones or business partners or former clients or whomever have to invest in taking care of things or figuring things out afterwards, right? I have people very, very close to me that, it wasn't a messy, difficult situation, but it was over a year to get everything straight and all the funds to the right people and, um, put here and there. So, yes, a couple $1,000, you know, is money. That's not, for some of us, that's not a small amount of investment, but it's also protecting our time that later, right, our loved ones, or if something happens, and we're incapacitated, but then we're not incapacitated, right? We come out of it, right? That we have to deal with the mess. Um, wow. Does anyone have any? We've got a minute left together. Does anyone have any other questions? I know it always takes a second for the chat to go through. So really quickly, Annika, I went ahead and put your name and then your email address in the
Oh,
chat.
great.
Is there another way you'd like people to contact you? You've given us such great information. I can't imagine people aren't going to be interested in, okay, what do I need to do? I don't have any of this in place. um, how best should they contact you?
Email is great. My phone number, I can put that in the chat as well.
Sure.
That's a great, I offer complimentary consultation, so no obligation to move forward, but it would allow us to kind of have more in-depth conversation about what that business looks like, what documents they have. and what would be a good recommendation for them to at least get the bare minimum in place. I am working on a probate right now, a woman who was unbelievably well organized. She had her sister found a will on her computer, but it had not been signed properly. It wasn't notarized. There were no
Oh
writs.
no.
So
Oh no.
you can't use it. You really need to make sure that, if you're doing this, it's such a complicated area. I try to not make it complicated, but and I also try to make sure that from the client experience, I know you guys are busy. You're running businesses. You've got family members. I try to make the time that we spend together as efficient as possible so that you tell me what it is you want to avoid. Maybe you don't have an idea of what the goal is, but you know what you don't want your estate to end up like. We can work around that. I can't make the decisions about who your executor is going to be, who's going to pay your bills if you become incapacitated, or make your medical decisions. So I do the heavy lifting on the other pieces. Try to make the
Right.
process as easy and as efficient as possible.
Right. Well, thank you so much for all of this great advice. We're really, really grateful. Guys, if anyone's still interested in joining FitPro Summer School, of course you can. We have 2 more speakers, and in our newsletters, everyone should have been able to see. We have the recordings up of the last 3 speakers. I'll get to Annika's, I'm hoping, this weekend, and we'll get that up for you guys so you can view it. But please reach out to her and let her know if you'd like that complimentary consultation. Thank you so much for offering that. I appreciate that. I'm sure that's standard in your business, but we're grateful. And then if anyone has questions of me, you can go to cjakeandjanetrain.com, and there's a pop-up. You can schedule a call with me. Or if you know me, you can always text me directly. So thank you so much for all of your sage and helpful and encouraging advice, Annika. We're really grateful to have had you today.
Oh, thanks so much, Michelle. This was so nice. And thanks for the questions. Thanks, Marcus.
Yes, yes.
Appreciate you.
Yes. Everybody take care, and thank you so much for attending. We're thrilled to have you guys. And yeah, contact Annika and get the help you need. Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye-bye.